before finally deciding that he would have to do it himself. And that's the book that you have in your hands this evening. It's a thrilling journey through rock and roll history as Robbie and the Robots, Hawkins and the Hawks, Rock and Roll Hall of Famers, the band, solo and film work, and of course, taking Dylan electric. As you probably already know, the band played their final show, The Last Waltz, 40 years ago this past weekend on Friday. And for those of us who were not lucky enough to be there that evening, we could do worse than having Martin Scorsese film it for us. Of that film, by the way, The Last Waltz, Rolling Stone just declared it the best concert film of all time. Tonight, Robbie is in conversation with our great friend Chris Connelly, whom you know from his reporting for MTV, ABC News, and ESPN. There's a lot of ground to cover, and I'm going to get out of the way so that Robbie and Chris can take you down the crazy river. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Chris Connelly and Robbie Robertson.
Welcome, book owners. Hold up your books for us. Robbie, first off, thank you so much for talking with us, and thank you for all the wonderful music that I know we've all been listening to as we've awaited this conversation. Was it not amazing to hear it? You pour so much of your life into this book, Testimony. What made you decide that this was the moment to tell your story?
I held out as long as I could.
I hope you have much longer to hold out.
I wasn't in a hurry to really do this, but a while back it came to a point to me that I'd been carrying around all these stories so long, and the load got pretty heavy. And I thought, I gotta do something with this. So I decided to write this book, and in doing so, it was a feeling kind of like taking these stories and setting them free. And after, I did have a little bit more pep in my step.
We've seen your comrade in arms, Bob Dylan, choose very specific scenes from his life for Chronicles. We saw Patti Smith choose a very specific time in her life for her book. We've also seen people like Elvis Costello go soup to nuts, go everything they've done. You chose really from your birth right up to that moment 40 years ago. Why was that the right story for you to tell?
That's as much as I could bite off in this. Telling it up, and it was kind of like getting through the story of the band and the Hawks and my brothers. I did, you know, that curvature for me in the storytelling was a piece unto itself. And so I really felt like I needed to come up to the last waltz. I needed to bring that closure, which the last waltz was, you know, part of the story. So that's as much, like I said, that's as much as I can handle in one chore.
You've been a storyteller for more than half a century, but what was it like telling stories that were true, or telling your own personal story in prose as opposed to the stories that you've shared with us in your songwriting over the years?
Well, they do intermingle, and as much as over the years in the songwriting, I've felt more comfortable disguising that, or taking stories, writing stories that have nothing whatsoever to do with you, but there's nowhere to hide, really. Some of that creeps in there, and it always has, but the idea of, with the band and with those songs that I wrote, of discovering a certain kind of mythology that they ended up calling Americana. I'm from Canada. So I guess it's North Americana or something.
It's true. One of the great gifts that your book gives us, and I think it's something that might have been lost in the past because of the timelessness of your music or because of who we were, is how young you were when you did all these things. Is how young you and the band were, and how young you and Bob Dylan were, and how in that youth you were able to be so creative. How did that wash over you? Because in a number of times you say, at 20 we were leaving, Ronnie Hawkins. At 16 I was on a train. It's staggering to think of someone that age producing the kind of music that you gifted us with.
I wasn't thinking of that at the time. At the time, I was on a mission, and I had to get to this place. I didn't know what that place was, but I tried to discover it when I took a train from Canada, from Toronto, Canada, down to the Mississippi Delta, and I was trying out to get in Ronnie Hawkins and the Hawks. It was a southern band, and not only being 16 was a big handicap in this too, but being from Canada in a southern band, it was like, I was sure they were going to just tell me to wait in the car, and that we don't do Canadians in this world. But going down there on that train, that experience and that feeling, and all of the things that brought me to that place, because I was I thought that I was going to the Fountainhead. All of the music that I was so addicted to seemed to, in the South, it seemed to be everywhere. It seemed to grow out of the ground. And here I was going to the Holy Land there. And that feeling at 16 years old was just like, this is right, isn't it? Isn't this what you do? I could never stop and think, gee, I'm 16 and I'm going, I had to act as if. I had to act like this was my calling.
There are so many characters who we thought we knew, who you tell us things about that we did not know. And there are people who we have never heard about, whom you share with us. And our first image that we're going to show right now over my head, we're going to project here, is of someone who you have introduced us to. And there she is.
Oh, yeah.
Who is that woman, that beautiful woman above us?
That's my mom. She was... She was born and raised on the Six Nation Indian Reserve from the Mohawk tribe, and she grew up there, and when she was about 15 years old, her mother passed away, and she was sent to live with an aunt in Toronto. And so her leaving the reservation at that time, it was such an undertaking in life for her to go out and discover another world. When at a very young age, she was told, and passed it on to me years later, when she got to Toronto, her aunt who took her in said, "Be proud that you're an Indian, but be careful who you tell." And so, for her in this, it was such a cautionary thing. It was such a feeling of, you don't belong here. You will not fit in unless you figure out a way to fit in. And so, her experience then in the city, it was complicated, but she did okay. But I think that she did okay because she looked really good and she could pass. Nobody was saying, "Oh, wait a minute here, no Indians allowed," So she managed to get by, but she grew up with a certain sadness in her soul too, for carrying this with her, and part of her was proud of it, and part of her was really sad about it too.
That sounds like so many of your stories. I mean, just what you're saying sounds like so many of the songs that you would go on to write.
Yeah, I think that that's an accurate observation. So some of the baggage that she brought with her in that, obviously, you know, the kids get some of that too, and I did carry some of that, and hopefully I was able to put it into some beautiful music along the way.
And you will learn, absolutely. You will, absolutely. One of the great gifts of this book is you will learn what an extraordinary woman your mother was and the key role she played at so many moments in your career. But your book is the people you encountered along the way. You have just begun to learn how to play guitar, and you have a conversation with Buddy Holly. You run into Buddy Holly as if you were waiting outside the stage door of a place like this. How did that happen?
That's part of the being on a mission, that I could not think, I wonder if I should do this or not. I had to do it. And in Toronto, it was one of those Alan Freed shows. And Chuck Berry was on it, Fats Domino, and a whole bunch of people, and Buddy Holly. And when Buddy Holly and the Crickets played, there was a sound. I mean, it was amazing with many of the people and things, but there was a sound coming out of his guitar that just ran right through me. And I was sitting there, and as the audience filtered out, somehow I couldn't move. I was just stuck there, and everybody left. And then and the place was empty, and some lights came up, and some of the musicians were picking up their things and gathering their stuff, and the Crickets were out there, you know, gathering. And Buddy Holly was putting his guitar in his case. And I walked over, and there was like a railing there as far as I could go. And I went over and I said, Mr. Holly, I've got to ask you, how do you get that sound out of your amplifier? How does it just, you know, it drilled right through me. How do you get that sound? And just because I was the only one standing there, and I was a kid, you know, he was like, you play guitar? I said, I'm trying, sir. And he walked over and he said, well, I'm going to tell you something. In my amp, there's two big speakers. One of them blew, and I love the sound of it. So he said, I didn't fix it. So he said, I got one good speaker and one bad speaker.
All of this knowledge you take with you as you get off that train in Fayetteville, Arkansas?
Yeah.
And who was there to meet you?
I was a guy that was also from Canada trying out with Ronnie Hawkins, the Hawks. We called him Magoo. His eyes weren't very good, and he was trying out on the piano. His thing, he didn't feel comfortable in it, and it didn't end up working out. So I was the lone Canadian stuck in this thing. But anyway, when I got there, he said, okay, Ronnie and the other guys are all over in the motel room here with a bunch of their cronies and everything. Come on over and say hello. So we walked in, and when we walked in the door, Ronnie Hawkins looked at me, and the room just hushed. And he said, son, these people ain't never seen a Canadian hobo before. He said, what the hell is that overcoat you're wearing? And I said, it's reversible. That was the beginning of me trying to win this job.
You were so young at the time that they would hide you on the bandstand because you were underage.
Well, you had to be 21 to play in these places, and I was 16. And I looked 16, and Ronnie would say, son, could you start shaving or do something? And I did. I tried shaving, but there was nothing to shave. And so all it did was irritate my neck, you know. But after a while, he figured out, if you stand there underneath that blue light, they can't really see who you are or how old you are. So I was just like this ghostly figure to the side for a couple of years.
How did Bo Diddley wind up playing in your hotel room?
Well, we were playing a club, and Bo Diddley, who was like a hero of mine. I first saw Bo Diddley when I was, I don't know, maybe 13 years old, something like that. I never felt a rhythm like that. There was something, there was some kind of voodoo rhythm magic in this man. And I'd listen to his records, and I'd try to understand, you know, what this gumbo was that he was making. So anyway, we're playing this club, and Ronnie decided that he was going to have some people over for a get-together after we finished playing that night. So he said to me, do you want to go next door and ask Bo if he'd like to come over? And I said, I'm going to go ask Bo Diddley if he wants to come over. Yes. So I went and I said, Mr. Diddley, we are going to have a little romp tonight. And Ronnie said, would you like to come by? So he said, yeah. He said, I like Ronnie. He's a funny cat, man. He said, what room are you in? So I told him my room. I went back to the club, and I had met a young lady earlier that evening who was as young as I was, and she had like you know, somebody else's birth certificate or something. So I asked her, I said, we're having some people over. Would you like to come by for a bit? So anyway, we went back to the hotel, and we were in my room, and there was a knock on the door, and I opened it, and Bo Diddley is standing there. He's standing there, and he's got his guitar case in his hand, too. So I said, come on in. Ronnie's going to be here in a few minutes. He'll let us know, you know, what room that we're, you know, all going to gather in. So he comes in, he sits there, and he's looking at this girl, and he's looking at me. Asks a couple little questions, and he reaches down and he opens the guitar case, takes out the guitar, and it's an electric guitar, it's not plugged in or anything. But it didn't matter. The sound of his thumb on that guitar. And so he sits there and he starts playing his I'm a Man beat. Dum 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 boom 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 dum 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 boom boom boom. And he starts making up a song about what he's going to do to this girl once he gets rid of me. So in the beginning, I think, it doesn't get any cooler than Bo Diddley playing his I'm a Man beat in your hotel room. And then I realized what he's singing about. And the girl is starting to look at her watch like, oh dear, you know. So just then Ronnie Hawkins comes in and says, you got Bo Diddley playing in your hotel room and you don't even have to pay him? I said, he's looking for a different kind of payment.
We have another great photograph to share with you that's also in your book. It's a shot of you guys on the bandstand. How about that, huh? Pretty good moment. What's going on in that photograph?
Well, this is a bit of time later from when I first joined them, and we have now gathered Rick Danko on bass, Richard Manuel on piano, and the wizard Garth Hudson. this now, we felt, because we had gone through, before getting to this, we had gone through a lot of different people back and forth, this one, that one, he leaves, he comes in, all of that. And when this happened, something clicked. Something felt like this is what we've been looking for. This is it. And we felt like our improvement level constantly was growing, and we were getting better and better, and our ambitions were getting bigger, and our horizon, you know, was, our imagination was going wild, and we outgrew being with Ronnie Hawkins, even, you know, at that young age. Musically, we had to go somewhere else, and his thing was wonderful. He was an incredible showman, you know, an amazing showman, and a very funny guy, and a great singer, and all kinds of things. But it was a rockabilly band, Ronnie Hawkins and the Hawks, when it began, and now we had evolved to another place musically, with the help of Garth Hudson too, and we just went to this other place, and finally we had to tell Ronnie we have to go.
And this was also, of course, with your musical brother-in-arms, then your kind of big brother, Levon Helm.
I absolutely, yep.
We were visiting his house, in fact, then.
So the thing with my original working my way into being accepted in this Southern band, and down in the Chitlin circuit and working down there, I soon learned that more important than impressing Ronnie was to impress Levon, musically. Because this guy had music running through every one of his bones, and he was not only the most musical person that I ever knew that closely like that, he was also a good teacher. You know, he had ideas and things, and it helped me make strides, you know, bigger strides than I would have. And also, when he found out about my background, you know, there was something about that fascinated him, this Jewish redskin. It was like, we don't have them down home. You know, what the hell is that?
I think you said you had a PhD in persecution.
Yeah, it was a funny thing when I was telling some of my story, you know, and I'm talking about this, and Ronnie Hawkins, we're in the car, and Ronnie Hawkins wakes up, and he says, damn, he said, it's bad enough that we knew that you were a redskin, now we're finding out you're a damn Jew too, you know? And so with these Southerners, that was a particular thing. And although down south, this was quite a rarity, I also knew that it was something that charmed them too, because it was unusual. And if I could play music like that, and I could be this kind of character with this kind of background, somehow in the world it was adding up.
History confirms you're right. But things were tough at first. You didn't have any money. And in this book, you tell a remarkable story about a heist that you and Levon nearly pulled off. You almost robbed a poker game?
Yes. It was just such a bad idea. It was so bad. But in our surroundings, in the places that we played, the people that we knew that were our friends, a lot of them were thieves. A lot of them were professional thieves, second story men, boosters, all kinds of. I was with a couple of them, a couple of friends of ours one night, and we're sitting there talking, and the guy's sitting there, And he's looking at my shoes and he says, "If you fall asleep, I'm going to be compelled to steal your shoes." This was the kind of people we were hanging out with. And in Arkansas, we had hit real hard times. We had played Jack Ruby's club in Fort Worth, Texas. This is just before he shot Oswald. And so it just shows you the kind of places we were running in. And this friend of Levon's came and said, "Listen, there's going to be this big poker game going on. I think you guys should put socks over your head, come in with these guns, and they'll give you all the money. And and then your hard times will be over, right?" And Levon thought this was a good idea. And he was my big brother, and I was loyal, and I just knew this was just wrong, and he was saying, "You gotta stand by me on this one." And I was like, damn, I don't want to stand. But anyway, we went, and thank the Lord they called off the game. And I was never so relieved in my life.
What was it about how the music was sounding then, with you guys together, that made you know this would be special someday?
Well, when the five of us were in a circle, and when the five of us were looking at one another and what each of us individually could offer, what we could all put in the pot and raise the stakes on this, we thought, we're just not a bunch of guys saying, "Hey, let's start a band." And we're out there paying our dues. We're out there studying the music. We're out there woodshedding. We're learning from all of these places in the Chitlin circuit. We're gathering gospel music and mountain music and Delta blues and R&B and New Orleans music, all of these things. And we're gathering and storing this up. And we knew that we were doing it for a purpose. We knew that it was giving us a depth in music that could carry us somewhere if we could find that place.
And just around that, a new figure enters your life. You go to a session with, I guess, John Hammond Jr., and he introduces you to Bob Dylan. John,
I played with John Hammond Jr. on a couple of his records, and he was a friend, and he was really interesting before a lot of other people were doing that character. So in New York, we were going somewhere, and he said to me, "Oh man, I forgot. I told a buddy of mine that I would stop, he's recording, and I would stop into the session and say hello. Do you mind if we stop for a minute?" So we did, and we went out to Columbia Records, and we go up and we go in this studio, and Bob Dylan is just recorded like a Rolling Stone, like a few minutes before this. So he says, so John introduces me to and I don't know that much about Bob Dylan at the time, and so he says to John, "You want to hear something?" John said, yeah. He said, "Are you sure? You never heard anything like this before." And I thought, whoa, all right. And he looks like he means it, right? So he says, "Go ahead, play it." So they played what they just recorded, like a Rolling Stone. And I thought, he's right. I don't think I have heard anything quite like this before. And it was a bit much to gather in the moment. You know, the words are flying by and this thing, and it's like a certain kind of sound and everything, and it's really pounding in the studio. And I thought, wow, I haven't wrapped my head around this yet, but this is a different way